All right, today the White House outlined plans to protect the nation's bank, power grids, and government computers from cyber attack. And these proposals would tighten oversight of critical infrastructure and require companies to notify consumers about data breaches. Now, let's bring in someone who has a unique perspective on cybersecurity. Retired Air Force Major General Dale Meyerrose was one of the first presidentially appointed chief information officer in the U.S. I mean, you were essentially at the front line directing all of the nation's efforts against cyber attack.
Well, I was responsible for many things that carry on the cyber business of the United States government in the intelligence community.
First, I want to talk about the legislation proposed today and the rule changes today. Interesting among them is, the Defense Department can't do anything domestically, which is where cyber attacks happen. So Homeland Security, under this proposal, will get some oversight of what's happening domestically. Is that going to work?
As you know, there are several proposals been on the Hill for several months, and so this is the White House offering cybersecurity as a priority from its perspective, and it outlined putting that responsibility with the Department of Homeland Security.
Now, I'm reading a book right now about cyber warfare. In fact, it's called Cyber Warfare. Jeffrey Carr has been on our show, wrote this. It's just mind-blowing. I don't think people realize how many attacks, if you'll call them that. Do you call them that?
Yeah, okay. Yes.
So there have been so many attacks on this country or within this country on the nuclear infrastructure, the power generating infrastructure. Obviously, we've been covering the Sony story and consumers getting their identity theft. Talk to me about some of the things that are already happening in this country.
Well, large numbers really happen in this area very, very quickly. For instance, the Pentagon probably gets hit 2 to 3 million times a day. The United States government gets hit 1 billion times a day.
Hit?
As in, somebody is probing, somebody is testing them, somebody is doing a reconnaissance on what does their firewall look like, what does their data structure look like, trying to find out something. Some of it's benign, some of it is ill-intended.
Who's doing it?
All kinds of folks. First of all, criminals are doing it.
Right.
And why do criminals go there?
What kind of criminals?
Any kind of criminals who want to steal money. Why do you rob banks? It's where the money is. More and more transactions, more and more of the economy is in cyberspace, and so the criminals will go there. Additionally, cyberspace gives terrorists and nation states who cannot exert other elements of national power a forum in which to have influence in the national stage.
Now, we've actually seen this. We've seen seemingly organized events coinciding with military strikes. I think of Russia and Georgia and the breakaway state of Estonia as well, when it seemed like hackers all tried to shut down the cyber infrastructure of a country immediately preceding a military attack.
Right. That's a recognition of how cyberspace interacts with other domains and other elements of national and international power.
Now, what about the commercial things that we're seeing a lot of when we see, the Sony story's been in the news a lot. You've got a company reorienting itself around control of the customer and the data, and then that customer data gets hacked into possibly credit cards. There's been numbers as high as 77 million customers at Sony who've had their information compromised.
Well, you're pointing out again what kind of criminals are going there. There are folks that are after stealing money, and stealing someone's identity is an easy way to do that. In fact, the amount of cybercrime happening today takes out about $1 trillion a year out of the world economy.
So these seem sort of ethereal numbers, though. It doesn't seem like it's happening right here, right now to me.
That's because it's done so incrementally and over a broad range of spaces that it's hard for somebody to get upset. Now, if somebody were going around and knocking off banks at $10, $15, $20, $100,000 at a whack, we'd be all concerned. But the fact that that amount leaves our pockets at a very small incremental element and only happens to what seems like a small number of people in the big scheme of things, it's easy to overlook this problem.
In the cyber warfare book that I mentioned, one of the things that was most shocking to me was what has happened at nuclear power plants in relation to hackers getting in, screwing up software, and leaving we don't know what behind in the computer systems.
Well, the thing to remember here is that we use cyberspace to help us get jobs done. And you gave a perfect example of how we use cyberspace to reduce the number of manpower required in order to control power entities. And so they remotely control. And anytime you put anything over the air, you connect it to a network, there are vulnerabilities that you have to protect against.
All right, we're going to keep covering the story endlessly because unfortunately it's not going away. I'm glad you could join us to talk about that.